Today's video will give an example of a design description. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. The design description is the best tool we have to explain large and complex designs. Sometimes we use a design description to explain an entire program or sometimes just a sub-area. But in either way, this allows us to zoom in on various aspects of design to give the development team a good idea of what we're trying to do. This view will demonstrate that with two design descriptions, each of which explaining different programs. A design description consists of a collection of views, each of which describe one aspect of a project. These views are arranged in a hierarchy where every child view is an elaboration of one part of a parent view. So we're going to start with our overall system view, view 1, and it's going to have three subviews, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. And each one of these is going to explain a specific aspect of the overall view. So we're going to elaborate on one of them, 1.1, and it's going to have three subviews as well, 1.1.1, 1.1.2, and 1.1.3. Now, of course, it's probably going to have more than three subviews, and don't forget 1.2 and 1.3 will also have more subviews, so this is actually quite a bit wider than it looks. And so we can elaborate on 1.1.3, and then we can also elaborate on 1.1.3.2, and then when we're finished, we might have hundreds of views all describing very specific aspects of the main view. So let's take a look at this. Let's say we want to consider a game that challenges a user to negotiate a series of mazes. Each maze is downloaded from the server, and the results of a given run are uploaded to the server. A given maze consists of a collection of immobile objects, such as walls, and immovable objects, such as sliding doors and bouncing balls. We also have ships and bullets. The user is to guide the ship through the obstacles until the end is reached without incurring more damage than is allowable. There is a client, and that's the game that the user plays, a server, which contains the various mazes and scores, and an administrative council. So we're going to start with a system overview. So we have the client, we have the server, and we have the admin. Now, just by itself, I have many unanswered questions, so my design information table is going to tell me what it is. First of all, this is view number one called System Overview. Its purpose is to illustrate all the components and how they interoperate. And the description, this view illustrates the three main components of the system, the client, the server, and administrator console, and the subcomponents of each. Now, notice the elements section, which is perhaps one of the most important parts, is going to enumerate each one. So it's going to have client, server, UI, engine accounts. And most importantly, it's going to have the view number of each one of those. So if I want to zoom in on one of these guys, I can take a look at that. So in this case, I'm going to zoom in on the client, and the client is going to be view number 2. So let's zoom in on view number 2. Now this guy is going to look quite different. What is this thing? Well, let's take a look. This is a data flow diagram. Notice the viewpoint on the bottom of the table. And this is the client overview. It illustrates how the data flows through the client at a high level. Now, there are many, many different aspects of this particular design, and one of which is going to be the elements data store. And so I'm going to look in the elements bit here, and elements is see view.2.4. So I'm going to zoom in on 2.4. So 2.4 is going to be, well, this looks to be a class diagram, and sure enough, it's a class diagram. And in this class diagram, we're going to focus in on the inertial object and in the elements, that's inertia, and this is 2.4.5. Now, since this is an individual class and I know nothing about it, I'm hoping this subview will also be a class diagram, and it's going to show me the member variables and the attributes of 2.5. And so here's my inertial, and here's my table. It's also a class diagram. And notice reference by 2.4, so that's my parent view. So if I zoom in on this guy, I could pop right back out to find its parent, but it also is going to show me some aspects of it, like this update method. And this update method is going to be 2.4.5.1, so I'm going to zoom in on that one. 2.4.5.1 update, and this is pseudocode, and sure enough, the viewpoint is pseudocode. It's referenced by 2.4.5. And it does reference other views, but the other views are not subviews, but rather they're peer views. So if I want to know more about how getX or setX works or getDX, then I can take a look at that view to figure that out. So let's take a look at another example. This is a software design description for an application which provides hikers with an ability to find a venue or a trail or an activity which aligns with their needs. So we're going to start with the system overview, which happens to be 3.1, and this is going to be a component diagram. So it's a UML component diagram. And I'd like to zoom in on the server bit. So the server bit is 3.4. So I'm going to jump into 3.4. And this is also a component diagram, and it has many aspects that I'm interested in. One thing I'm really interested in is the database. So let's see here, database, components, 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 and I'm going for database 3.5. So I'm going to zoom in on 3.5. And this database is also a component diagram. It's going to talk about how the database is connected to the server through relational database using JSON schema and SQL. But I'd like to learn more about how the database is sending data through. So I'm going to look at 3.5.2. And here we have yet another component diagram. And I'm really interested in the get post history. So I'm going to look at get post history 3.5.2.2. And here's going to be the actual pseudocode that I'm going to use to generate that. Here's another example of a design description. Now, what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to jump into a random view here, 5.1.2.7. Now, I don't know anything about this view, so let's say this is my first point of contact. Well, I'm going to read it. The purpose is to describe how data flows to a client making an RSVP request. Okay, so that tells me a little bit about it, but I need to know its context. So I'm going to go into my reference by 5.1.2, and 5.1.2 AWS server looks to be a component diagram. And this guy is a subcomponents that describe each kind of request that could be made. Request for what? I don't really know that answer either. So I'm going to go 5.1 and system overview. And now we're beginning to see the overall system design. And so what happened is we had a server that was talking to the client and it's going to make a request. And that request was that view. So the design description allows me to start at a very specific view and understand its context by zooming out with the reference by links, as well as allows me to have the overall view and zoom in on specific aspects of design that I may care about. This is example 4.1.1 through 4.1.5 in the design descriptions chapter of the software design textbook.